Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. It is about 9:30, 9. Comparatively quiet. The library is actually closed, which the kinfolk right there might be finding out quite soon. So on my way up here, this is the village library, the neighborhood library. It's comparatively quiet on a Monday, as it usually is. Very minimal vehicular traffic and very less pedestrian traffic. However, that being said, on my way up here just a few minutes ago, 9:30, half an hour late, CPT in full effect. I am actually walking by the spot that I was describing in recent days about where the brethren comes out from the doorstep of one of the buildings here and causes assault on loved ones. And so I was walking by the spot and I'm like, yeah, okay, this is that scene. Then just a few steps later, there's another brother who I know from the village for years, who is decked out in a kufiye, draped around his shoulders like it's a Superman cape. And he is not Muslim. He is a communist. That's how I know him. Blessed brethren, know him for years. But he's not Muslim. He does not practice Islam. And there's nothing, it's not a condemnation about communists, but it's just a matter of recognizing that he doesn't represent Palestine. He doesn't represent Islam. And it's an opportunity for causing static and kicking up dust. And it's very provocative because that's part of the methodology in our experience with interacting with communist brethren. It's very inflammatory to get a response from people. And so I tell the brethren peace and blessings to him, and that's a bad sign. I say peace and blessings. Then I point to what he's wearing and I say that's a bad sign. He doesn't say anything the whole time because at this point, kinfolk know, and kinfolk know that their words get them caught up, so they don't say anything. They just do provocations as subtly and passive-aggressively as possible, for the most part. That's not to put anything past kinfolk, but that's the modus operandi at the moment. Sniffing and sniffing and sniffing like hyenas until finding an opportunity. Hyenas are no less and worse than lions or anybody else, but we are elephants and zebras and ants. So, anyways, he doesn't say anything. He just smiles and continues walking right in front of me very slowly. So again, provocative. I tell him peace and blessings to him. It's a bad sign. And as I continue, I say assalamu alaikum. There's one other brethren across the street observing the situation and a number of the usual suspects. So anyways, that's a scene right here just a few minutes ago. And part of what I and I address, articulate, communicate concerning the concerns, because it makes it difficult to be Muslim. That type of hiring of activism and collusion with activism makes it difficult to be Muslim. As we are taught from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad with Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, then known as Malcolm X, when Malcolm X says the inflammatory words about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, there may be very strong reason and emotion for saying what he does, but at the same time, he makes it difficult to be Muslim at that time. So the activism and the rabble-rousing, the provocation, makes it difficult to be Muslim. And I'm speaking from personal experience because already, if you are Muslim and if you practice Islam and you offer salat, then you know. And if you offer salat in an area where there is significant contention and hostilities against Islam, against Muslims, then you know. It's not even a matter of like tensions. It's not even a matter of like concerns about physical well-being per se, in an earthly sense. If you have the mindfulness, then you know that when you offer salat, you are opening the gates of heaven. And when you open the gates of heaven, you are also awakening hell. And that's one of the reasons why it is beneficial to do it in a congregation, because it is very challenging doing that as an individual. And when there is dust being kicked up around oneself, when hell is already being raised, even offering salat is increasingly contentious. So that's not making any excuses or anything else like that, but it is putting an obstacle, because already right here where I live in this village, when I offer salat, immediately radios go off, car alarms go off, lawnmowers go off, people start yelling. Serious, you think it's hyperbole? I'm not joking. Immediately as I start offering salat. So there's awareness, and some of it is very much intentional, some of it is subconscious, like it's like just the environment. So that's already the scene before any of the Israeli-Palestine. That's for a number of years, and I don't go to masjid because the same police officers that are talking about putting a hole in me, threatening me when I'm in the vicinity, are the same police force wearing their straps and offering salat at Juma. So there's no peace there, and that's part of the concern. That's a significant concern. So this activism, this political strategy of ascension within the imperialist construct of the world and vis-a-vis the United States, it makes it further difficult to be Muslim. And to be honest, there's uncertainty if this is actually sanctioned by the Ummah, to be honest, and what the actual agreements and allegiances are, what the actual spoken or written agreements are. And it's difficult to have that conversation because we receive a considerable amount of love from the Ummah, from brethren, but we also see a lot of shade, a lot of disrespect, a lot of suspicion. The suspicion is understandable, but when it comes down to whenever I approach a Muslim and I say Assalamu alaikum, and the Muslim says nothing back, hi. What are we to do with that? We know what the proper response is supposed to be, and anything less, the person is not practicing Islam, because that's against what the Quran teaches us. We know that. We study. We practice. So when a Muslim doesn't respond with alaikum wassalam, we already know. So it's not even a matter of being devalued or disrespectful, but it's like I'm supposed to continue to pretend this person is practicing Islam, and who am I to judge otherwise? But it's a matter of like, yo, what is the nature of this conversation at this point? Because this person is proclaiming something, but we just see evidence to the contrary, and it's not a condemnation, but it's genuinely like, how are we supposed to interact with this person at this point? How are we supposed to pretend to have a genuine conversation and not address the fact that we are not respected? And it's not even a matter of respected, but even this person has not returned the obligatory response and recognizing our solicitation, whatever the person believes in terms of the genuineness of whatever we're trying to be or striving to be or pretending to be, it was not reciprocated. So we're supposed to just continue on into this like pretense or whatever. So that's part of the difficulty. And we understand, a lot of cats are faking the funk. And additionally, we've been in this trot. I have been in this trot for 20 years and plus. So, ain't perfect. Have yet to offer our Fajr today. So, ain't perfect. And ain't nobody else's fault about my practice. But it does make it difficult. And other brethren and sisters, it's beneficial to be aware of that because it affects their practice as well. So, same thing when I'm talking to Jewish brethren, and I say Shalom Aleichem, and I get nothing in response. Zero, look away, blinders. there's less of an obligation in terms of a doctrinal edict from the Torah, but still, it's very much the same thing. Or if brother responds, "Hi, Alechem Shalom." Now that, to be honest, like which one, in which community do we receive that? Do we receive, when we compare going to approaching a Muslim and saying Assalamu alaikum, and approaching Jewish brethren, Israeli brethren, and saying Shalom Aleichem, which community has a higher percentage of providing the commensurate response? Walechem, wow. Walechem assalam. Walechem shalom. Hey, yeah, there's some dissonance with that one, but hey, we understand why. Anyways, what's the percentage? It's about even, to be honest. It's about the same. And to be honest, yeah, actually, it's probably a little bit higher. We probably get a further response from Muslims, but I'm hesitating saying this part of it. The difference is that often with Muslims that we know, it actually is somewhat of a lower response, to be honest, and that's probably what's of further concern. I'm not trying to blow up anybody's spot, but that's the further concern of regularly talking and interacting with kinfolk. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm doing a Zoom thing. It's the Finding I session. Have yet to receive anybody communicating the intention of connecting on the joint. We're not recording it, actually. Well, I'm doing this joint, but and technically I'm supposed to be doing like other work and stuff, whatever. But this is copacetic as long as nobody else is on it. Which in effect I'm originating or conjuring that kind of effect, so I'm mindful of that too. I'm assuming this because it seems as though the internet went out. It did. What? Okay. So I just got that notice. An unknown error occurred, of course. I mentioned the greetings, and at the very beginning, like how we are supposed to respond, and I mentioned the difference between kinfolk that we know for a while not responding, and to be honest, in Judaism, interacting with Jewish brethren, through the years, and this is through the years, the overwhelmingly, like, there's not a response, or at least not a commensurate response. Probably about 50% don't even say anything, don't even look, and just continue on through the years. Maybe about 30 to 40% respond by saying hi, and through the years, very infrequently is the response Alechem Shalom. That being said, it actually increases, and that's particularly in the United States. Actually, in worldwide, in traveling outside the United States, it's actually about 100% Alechem Shalom, the response. I can almost veritably confirm that, definitively confirm that. So in the United States, though, that's been through the years, that's been the experience. That being said, in recent years, it actually improves. It is an improvement, and there is an increasing amount of. First, there's an increasing amount of eye contact and responsiveness, just in general. So it's less a matter of the blinders. In addition, I'm wearing tzitzit now, and so that's something that kinfolk come to me at this point. Brethren just a few days ago approaches me. Actually, a number of brethren in the past year, particularly since wearing tzitzit, so that makes a difference, and that's recognizable too, because most kinfolk presume me to be either Muslim or Rastafari, which both are accurate, but people make their decisions based upon those appearances initially. So it's understandable. Still though, Shalom Aleichem, that's either people honor that weight or don't. It's not. It's less a matter of who is saying it. So that has effects on people themselves. Anyways, it improves, and again, I guess TT has an effect on that. So, and maybe that's also a consideration concerning Muslim brethren's response or lack thereof. I don't know if there's much been a change or a difference in the past year in that respect, but anyways, those are some of the conditions and some of the challenges of having this conversation with brethren, because we know kinfolk have suspicions towards me, even kinfolk who know me for years, even after going to masjid and offering salat, and additionally, and knowing me from that, still having suspicions about who I am, what I'm about, who do I work for, this, that, and the other. Very understandable, but it makes it difficult to have this conversation in a discreet, private, and further constructive way. So, and meanwhile, we do these joints, and because when I do interact with Muslim kinfolk, it's difficult to get to this level of conversation in a comfortable way, to get through the polite talk and kind of get comfortable and everything else like that, to be able to have like a sit down, concentrated, because kinfolk are in their own things. Don't have time for it. Takes a while to get to this level of conversation, even when knowing people. So, and most kinfolk don't have time for an impromptu kind of sit down, because it takes probably at least an hour or so to get comfortable, relaxed, concentrated, quiet around us, and then, okay, let's chop it up. What's going on? That takes at least like an hour, and a lot of cats at this age, with this kind of authority and responsibility, have less of an hour just to like make available, generally speaking. So it's difficult to have this conversation. So we post it like this, and then we get approached by the grunts on the street, and then we respond to that. So that's the modus operandi at the moment, and that's not just with the Ummah, but it's with a number of different communities. So that's part of the challenge, because the grunts tend to be further aggressive, less respectful, and the conversation is less productive, generally speaking. But this is the walk we are in, that I personally am in. So it is what it is, and all things happen by the grace of the Most High and by the divine architecture of the Most High. So we just recognize it for what it is and do our best accordingly. Strive to improve when there's the perception of the necessity and availability of improvement, and make the best of each situation. So, all right, that being said, part of what is the intended before the events of earlier today is talking about this act, this endeavor of proselytizing, and just addressing some of the components of methodologies, and how methodologies can be improved. I speak about this on a number of occasions before, but I'll address it specifically, some particular points about it at this moment. So first of all, recognizing that a lot of, and by proselytizing, I'm talking about Islam, I'm talking about Christianity, I'm talking about Buddhism, I'm talking about Baha'i, lightweight talking about Sikhi, but the major traditions that go out and try to convert people to be part of the community. Different communities do it in different ways. Many communities do it in the same way. Some are very proactive, some are very subtle, some are very institutional, some are very imperial, some are very laid back. Some are a combination of many of these. But that just act of going out to recruit somebody to be part of a religious community. Now, Baha'i is comparatively recent, so in terms of formation as an earthly religion, so less applicable. Some of this is less applicable when I talk about hundreds of years of proselytizing. Similarly with the Sikhi, and also, to be honest, my direct experience with Sikhi proselytizing is comparatively modest, and we receive a number of different communications regarding that. In some ways it talks about Sikhi not proselytizing, in some ways it's talking about Sikhi like doing proselytizing in a kind of a relaxed way, recognizing that Sikhi comes from the Desi land. So, and Desi land tends to not be proselytizing, like Hindu doesn't proselytize per se. However, Buddhism does, in a different way than the Western Abrahamic faiths, but still it does. So I'm aware of Sikhi brethren going out and doing informational things about just informing, particularly like when Sikhi kinfolk, and I don't mean to say this comical, but when basically Sikhi kinfolk say, we're not Muslim, don't hate us because we're not Muslim. Basically, and I don't mean to sound trite, but that's basically what it is. And so it's like an informational thing. I've seen a number of those types of endeavors and scenarios. But in terms of trying to proselytize people, it's a fine line, because even just informing people of a spiritual path is somewhat of or can be understood and even identified as a methodology of proselytizing, but it's a fine line. And anyways, but that being said, my awareness concerning Sikhi specifically is comparatively modest, but definitely Christianity does, definitely Islam does, Buddhism does in a somewhat different way. Baha'i definitely does, but also in a further relaxed way. So that's generally what we're addressing. With all due respect to each religiosity, we practice the basic tenets, and it was Ridvan recently within the Baha'i faith, and to be honest, my personal practice of our spiritual tradition is comparatively modest in recent years across the board. From Pesach a few weeks ago, Ramadan, it's comparatively easier to observe because it's just not eating. But even Eid, visiting kinfolk, Holi in recent days, Vesak is approaching. So across the board, my practice has been comparatively the word watered down seems like, but it requires some strengthening. But wow, okay, I was something when I'm talking about that, but proselytizing. All right, I'll just get into what I was saying. I'm trying to think of the specific line that I was on a minute ago, but I'll just continue on with the general consideration here. So when it comes to proselytizing, in the past couple of 100 years, actually even for over 1,000 years, there have been some basic kind of methodologies, and again, I'm spending like 20 hours talking about all my disclaimers about what my modest knowledge is, but I abstain from being a missionary within any particular religion. Actually, I distance myself whenever I am involved in a religious community through the years, Christianity, and additionally, when the endeavor of proselytizing emerges, I distance myself from that. So my point here is saying that my knowledge about the specific methodologies of missionary work and proselytizing is comparatively modest. All the different specific methodologies and techniques and details comparatively modest. I observe, and I'm aware through the years of observation, but it's modest. So that being said, what our modest awareness provides is that a lot of the methodology is the same as it is for hundreds of years. What we observe is that one particular methodology is going into places where there is abject poverty, offering things that earthly needs that villages have, particularly rural indigenous villages, whether it's in India, whether it's other places around the world, Africa, again, places where there's comparatively material want, and then the organized religions having materiality going in, and then offering education, offering health services, and then also sharing religious teachings and signing people up accordingly. There are a lot of different variations of that. Another similar endeavor is offering employment and other type of economic benefits, even if people aren't in abject poverty, offering other type of innuendos or economic opportunities. So it's not necessarily as much of a religious recruitment, but it's a socioeconomic recruitment that requires signing up into the religious community. And that's when going out. That's actually even here, inviting immigrants and people who are in poverty. And additionally, it's a matter of helping people out with their shelter and home housing, helping people out with employment, and additionally. And so again, it's a matter of conferring economic benefits on the pretense of people signing on to the religious community. So it's less of a genuine endeavor. But the point is not to condemn it. It's just a matter of recognizing, like, that's one of the methodologies. There's street preaching and there's all these different types of stuff. But I'll try to just get to the point. The point is, many of these methodologies are very much antiquated because many of these methodologies are based on the presumption that people have never heard about Jesus before, that people had never heard of Islam before, when in actuality people are aware, and people just don't believe. People don't see the practice. People don't believe in the practitioners and don't trust in the practitioners. So, and people might not know everything, but it's not a matter of awakening people to something that people have never heard before. So that's one consideration. The other consideration, well, continuing further in this one. So people already know. Many people already know. The other thing is, people are not, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the vast many people are actually illiterate, don't know how to read and write. Today, vast many people are literate. People can read, can write, have access to information, the internet, and additionally. So people are not reliant upon proselytizers, upon religious leaders for knowledge about anything. People can get the information themselves. So it's a different ball game. And it requires the religions to up their game too and respond accordingly. So the whole notion of people depending upon the religious leaders and being like docile domesticated animals, and that's a very strong thing, but that's lambs and shepherds. That's exactly the parables. So it's less, the lambs are independent. The lambs have their own thing going on. May not necessarily be healthy and still have needs, but it's not the same as it was 100 and 200 years ago. And so the leverage and everything else that was perhaps somewhat effective 100, 200 years ago, it's not happening the same way today. That's one thing. The second thing is that, people, the religious leaders are not practicing the faith, and are relying significantly upon the trappings, the earthly trappings of imperialism, as the crux for, or the strength of converting people and convincing people to get involved, rather than necessarily the essence of the truth within the religion. People are not practicing it. Like, for example, when kinfolk ask me if I'm Muslim, it's very frustrating because it's like right after I'm offering salat, and the kinfolk have just been smoking hashish or whatever else, and then asking me if I'm Muslim. And I try to be respectful, and I try not to negate people and challenge people, and it's very difficult. So one consideration, and this can go for Christianity or otherwise, but one consideration is like, so what does a Muslim do? Does a Muslim smoke? Do Muslims smoke? Do Muslims have sex outside of marriage? Do Muslims steal? Do Muslims cheat? Do Muslims lie? Do Christians lie? Well, it's different for Christians, but the same questions can be asked about Christianity. But it's different because Christianity doesn't have an actual, a formal edict of rules to live by. But my point for that is saying this. In the context of Islam, in Muslims, or what it means to be a Muslim, we can say, the Quran says, of course not. A Muslim does not do any of those things. So, okay, fine, beautiful. Alhamdulillah. However, the actuality is that when we talk about an ummah of over 1 billion people, we can recognize very easily that the vast many of within that 1 point some odd billion people do one of those things. Smoke, lie at some point, tell an untruth, have sex outside of marriage, cheat people, steal, being part of, well, getting to the whole citizenship is a whole other thing, but so if that changes what the definition is to be Muslim, because it becomes increasingly a political identity rather than a religious practice when asking that question, and for particularly for that purpose of solidarity and strength and everything else like that, rather than necessarily a question about religiosity, spirituality, relationship with Allah, and additionally. So it's beneficial to recognize that, because that's just naturally what happens when numbers get so huge, is that it's diluted. The practice itself is diluted. And so when the lines are drawn along in that way, when it's like, okay, this is 1 point some odd billion, say 2 billion, 2 billion strong. Okay, if that's where the line is drawn, what is the nature of that 2 billion that everybody shares, that everybody's doing, that we can say definitively, we're drawing this line, this is what everybody practices here? It's difficult to do that. It's difficult to say everyone in these 2 billion does this, or everyone does that. And so thus, because of that, then the definition within that boundary of what people are called is less meaningful. It has less weight. And so the pretenses of the subsequent pretenses of division, separation from others, from other communities, becomes increasingly feigned as well, because, well, point is, when inviting people into that fold of 2 billion, what at 1 point some odd billion, however many people it is, when inviting people into that, it can actually, that the composite, like the composite characteristic of that collective, like if the qualities of everybody in that collective were shared equally, that composite may be considered a lesser spiritual discipline, a lesser deen, than what is the deen of the person actually being invited to that. Because let's say it's a student at a university who's disciplined, studying, sober, maybe doesn't pray, or maybe is like learning about prayer, actually already offers charity, volunteer in addition, and so is already on the deen, strong, not is still a virgin, and very chaste, guarding modesty and additionally, but just is an agnostic. Parents raise the child just to be a student, and maybe they're studying engineering, and so they're straight-laced. They go to class. They don't mess around with other ignorant stuff, and so they're on the deen. They might not specifically study the Quran. They may not have a knowledge about Arabic. They may not offer salat. They might experiment in fasting and during Ramadan, and additionally just because they heard about it. But they're strong on the deen. And if kinfolk from Islam are like, yo, that brother's looking decent, the sister is looking decent, and like, yo, you should join us. Well, who is us? And are you actually offering them something stronger than what they're already doing? Because, and to be honest, I've modest, my experience of this is modest, going to give me disclaimers, but what I observe is that the process of inviting into Islam varies in terms of the ongoing relationship and commitment that the initial guides provide towards the whole term of revert is it's not a Muslim who came up with that word, to be honest, that English word, but the person who's brought into Islam or welcomed into Islam, the nature of the commitment. So, all right, there's another point. There's a different thing here, so I'll try to summation this. Point is, when the deen within the ummah as a collective is diluted, when it's unconcentrated, when all there are many different people who are claiming to be Muslim, who are recognized as Muslim, who are Muslim for many generations, but at the same time are drinking, are having sex outside of marriage, are involved in unscrupulous business activities, even just being employed by a corporation, and doing these other things. That dilutes the collective deen. And when kinfolk are performing dawah, it can actually be putting a stumbling block on the recipient. It can be, and often is, because the collective deen within the ummah needs strengthening. So, and that same thing for Christianity. And to be honest, the reason why I don't speak about Christianity in the same way is because Christianity involves, again, a very strong advantage in terms of technology and material riches, and builds and proselytizes from the strength of that. Particularly, for a long time, I'll say. And part of the challenge in talking about Christianity and discipline or deen or principles is that the premise of Christianity, by and large, along many of the denominations, is simply a matter of proclaiming faith. So it's not about actually practicing any particular principles or virtues, though they are talked about and they are encouraged and additionally. But the bottom line is what a person believes, what a person proclaims, and then being held accountable for that. And then when becoming part of a community, being guided and led to do things within the community accordingly. So it's not necessarily saying we don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't do drugs, we don't have sex outside of marriage. It's not saying any of those things. Those things may be part of it, but it's not the bottom line. And whenever there is a violation, then people have the opportunity of repentance and then reaffirming the faith and probably paying a little bit further high in tithing or otherwise. But anyways, I don't mean to sound condescending or dismissive or disrespectful towards Christianity, but that's generally the modus operandi, and I mean that's the facts. And I don't mean to sound down, but just speaking matter of factly about that. So when it comes to proselytizing, as I said, the basic components of this joint. One is that people are already knowledgeable. People have information. People are literate. People are not dependent upon religious leaders for education and for information. So the leverage and the authority that religious leaders have is much less than it is 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So that's one thing. Second thing is that many of the leaders, and particularly the aggregate practitioners within a religious community, abstain from practicing a thorough discipline, and so inviting people to participate in that community is often a step down from what people are already doing. Not always, but very often. So in that actuality, it's actually a violation within the religious community, because becoming part of that religious community is a hindrance to the spiritual path of the people, particularly in the earthly walk, in the earthly discipline. So that is another consideration, another component in this joint. Another big consideration regarding proselytizing is the whole phenomenon of citizenship. I hesitate in delving into this part of the conversation because it gets considerably involved, and there's another component that is beneficial to address here. So I have to pause for a second to consider the sequence here. Citizenship, and then alternative ways of proselytizing, like how to offer like involvement in the spiritual community and even rapprochement with other believers or other practitioners of other faiths in an increasingly long-term scenario. So that's part of the consideration here. So I'll endeavor to address the issue of citizenship because it's important, particularly concerning Islam, and then go into some ideas, some considerations for alternative methodologies of offering dawah, of doing missionary work. And additionally, that may sound like completely counterintuitive and counter-effective, but at the same time, when you look at it in an honest way, in a long-term way, it's actually discussibly much further favorable for all people involved. So, citizenship. And again, this is particularly towards Ummah, because citizenship with Christianity, the Christianity has been for a long time, actually, to be honest, for over 1,000 years, has been infused with the phenomena of the Republic. And in recent centuries, the modern democratic republic. So a lot of this there's an infused kind of relationship between Christianity and the democratic republic. So it may be further involved to kind of deconstruct the nature of that relationship, but particularly with Islam, it's less the case, because Islam is only perhaps in the past century, particularly since the world wars, further in relationship with the Democratic Republic as a pretense of imperialism. The Ummah had its own methodology of imperialism before that, so it was a competing kind of thing. So, but at this moment, in this the emerging post-Republic era of world civilization, there's a larger migration of Muslims and within democratic republics and intergenerational attachment in relationship between Muslims and nations, democratic republic nations. So things to consider in this respect. One is that when a person is a citizen, that person is a subject to the Democratic Republic. People talk about individual rights and freedoms and this and the other, but to recognize that just as people have a say, allegedly or idealistically within the government of that nation, people are also are subjects, are subordinates to the government as well. That's the nature of the agreement, the nature of the compact. So whatever the government says, the person has to obey. The citizen has to obey. Just like the edict of a king or a queen, person has to obey. Each person is supposedly a sovereign, a king or queen in a republic, and every person is also a subject. So, in that respect, when that subject is Muslim, then that subject is required to carry out the edict of the republic that is not Islamic. And that obviously is an infringement on the deen. And that makes it difficult, again, for the Muslim to genuinely invite anybody else into that practice, because that Muslim is either inviting that person, the recruit, into the same compact and subjugation of by the Republic, to be a subject of the Republic, or if the recruit is maintaining their own citizenship, collusion and acceptance of the Republic, because the invitor is a subject of the Republic. So whenever that's the situation, whenever a Muslim is a citizen of a republic, that's the United States, that's Britain, France, and otherwise. So Ghana, Nigeria. So that's the challenge in that relationship between Islam and the Republic, that a Muslim who is a citizen is a subject to the Republic, and that undermines the deen of the Muslim. And when that happens, that Muslim is in less of a position to invite other people to join within that practice of Islam, because that person's invitation itself is under the authority and subjected to the nation that the Muslim inviter is subject to. So, and that's part of the challenge of observing what's happening here with the political activism, because it's all based on the premise of political activism and citizenship, not just with the United States, but within the World Republic. So that's part of the challenge. And that's part of the fallacy within the practice of dawah, when the practitioner, when the person doing the dawah is a citizen of a republic. And again, like these are things that the Ummah already knows. I'm not saying anything new or radical. The thing that's different about it is that the most people who are saying this within the Ummah don't speak English, because they just say, evil. They say that all of the West is evil, and it's easier for Muslims within the West to discount that, because they just say, those Muslims are crazy and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just so simplified, and they don't understand the world system and this and the other. And there seem to be fewer voices within the Western civilization who are able to, or at least not as able, but who are articulating that same validity that of criticism or of just truth, that the non-English speaking Muslims are from Syria, or from Afghanistan, or Pakistan, or Arabia, or Egypt, or otherwise, Iraq and otherwise, Iran, Muslims in the West seem less inclined or less vocal. And again, I'm off media for the most part. It's difficult to find, and maybe there's pockets or otherwise. But point is, it's not just a political subjugation. People are beholden to their jobs, and to provide food on the table and shelter over their families. And additionally, so it's very entrenched, and thus Muslims have a very vested interest in propagating the imperialistic system, and it's very challenging. So it's understandable, but at the same time, being mindful that when people are making the individual decision, that's one thing, and people have to answer for that. That's between people and Allah themselves, between each person and Allah respectively. But then when people are recruiting people to join in that's even further trouble. So that's part of the challenge with citizenship. Again, it applies to Christianity, it applies to Sikhi, it applies to Buddhism, but the framework of principles are different within each of those other traditions, and so there's less. I have to think about that, like how to address that same phenomena as it exists within Christianity and Islam, because it's the same thing, but the mechanics of Christianity are different than the mechanics of Islam in terms of political organizing and missionary work, and also, as I mentioned before, behavioral doctrines, and additionally, and so this type of reasoning is different within Christianity than it is within Islam. So it seems as though the Ummah is increasingly receptive and responsive to this type of rationale and this type of articulation and reasoning. Within Christianity, the attachment to the Republic is much deeper. So it's much further difficult to acknowledge this truth. And in addition to that, again, within Christianity, there's an absence of specific behavior to cite. Okay, see, this is where your citizenship is infringing on your practice of this discipline right here, because as long as a person can claim Jesus, then the citizenship is not abrogating that person's faith. There it is. So there's little reasoning with that. So separation of church and state, there we go. So pretty much like anything goes at that point, as long as a person can proclaim Jesus as their utmost. So, and I don't mean to sound flippant, but that's the basic. So the reasoning is different within Christianity. Within Buddhism, it's also different because the vast many of the Buddhist practitioners in the West are Westerners. And so, and there's the whole thing of like fleeing from Judeo-Christian authoritarianism and finding a refuge within Buddhism. It's very intellectual. It tends to be reserved from politics and a lot of the inflammatory stuff. And it kind of just finds its own kind of like its own lane. Very significantly attached to liberalism, political liberalism. There is a strong Jewish presence within the Western Buddhist community. Again, it's very intellectual. It's very skillful in articulating. A lot of the people are highly educated. There's a higher socioeconomic demographic involved within Buddhism generally. There is outreach to the jails and additionally, and so there's a certain amount of covering the bases in that respect. But the reasoning is very different in terms of Buddhism as well, because it does emphasize, well, I can't say that either, because when looking at a lot of the Buddhist practitioners in the West, it's a free-for-all in terms of behavior. And now it's not. It's perhaps certain types of behavior. It's a very liberal type of hedonism. So all different types of sex is essentially um, sanctioned or like accepted. Intoxications are accepted. I mean, much of the leaders in the Buddhist movement in the past half century are practitioners and very boldly are pioneers in consumption of LSD and other types of hard drugs. So that's very much part of the roots of Western Buddhism in the past century. So again, it's a very liberal politic, and it establishes its own lane. It maintains its institutional affiliations. It abstains from kicking up dust too much, so it doesn't have as much antagonism and contrast. So there's less of a motivation for like calling it out. There's the whole business of retreats and doing meditation, and so the aesthetic of it is very calming. And additionally, and whatever indiscretions people are doing on their own, people are doing on their own. So it's not officially sanctioned by the Buddha. And when people want to experience some kind of like redemption or otherwise after behaving in such a way, it's a matter of providing a donation, inviting a Rinpoche or a Lama or a venerable one from Thailand to visit and give a Dharma talk, make a contribution to the Buddhist center, and additionally feel better, be accepted, have a relationship, and continue on. So now we get the visitation. So anyways, that's within Buddhism. So and then recruiting people accordingly, and the nature of the recruitment, it's not in people's faces. Again, Buddhism finds its lane, particularly in the United States. Buddhism finds its lane, and doesn't try to be like contentious or whatever else. And it's kind of like kind of just, I won't say passive aggressive, but it's just kind of laid back in that respect. And so they might invite people to participate in a meditation group or this, that, and the other. But it's a little bit on a different vibe than other religions. And again, there's a certain amount of classism in the nature of the social nature of Buddhism in the West. It does tend to be further higher education, further socioeconomic involvement, a lot of individualism, and very aligned with the secular vibration, because again, Buddhism, in terms of the theology, people have their different interpretations of it being atheistic or monotheistic or polytheistic or whatever else, but it lends itself to a confluence with the secularism, so with the whole science and everything else like that. So talking about Buddhism and proselytizing, again, that's a different type of reasoning. With Baha'i, as I mentioned, we're getting a lot of very different types of activity at the moment. So, and it's like people are communicating, but in a distant way, and it's uncertain whether people are like are doing like overtures and shots across the bow, whether people are trying to like just test the waters and like communicate directly, but getting a lot of different signs at the moment. So not trying to be hostile or whatever, but it's like the passive communication is increasingly obvious. So how about just talk? How about just like, just holler, and that's it. But like it's like people are attached to devices. Wow, this is like a little bit surreal right now. But like people are attached to devices and are communicating to people directly in the person through passive means, and being directed by the devices. So it's a little bit of a trippy, surreal kind of experience. And I say that as I'm talking to a device. I'm not getting signals about it, but it's here all the same. I'm uncertain how much the audio is picking this up at this point. So I guess we're wrapping this up at some point soon. So we're talking about the citizenship. I was talking about the different religions. As I mentioned, Baha'i is comparatively new. Baha'i also seems to connect itself with a higher socioeconomic experience. Finding its lane is actually very proactive, but is very proactive in a very concentrated way. Very involved in interfaith work, and then from interfaith work, inviting people into the Baha'i community. Very proactive in terms of having programming, and additionally, but it doesn't have the same institutional breadth as Christianity and Islam. So the methodology of doing outreach is different. Similar within Sikhi again. It's different, concentrated, English-speaking nations, very attached to kind of like the British Empire experience. And even then, when having a physical presence in different places, still being very kind of concentrated as a community, as an ethnic and cultural community, a linguistic community. And what is observed is a lot of the outreach is in terms of providing information rather than necessarily signing people up. Some of that might be attributable to the numbers and the perceived efficacy of going out and proactively recruiting people, but my knowledge about the methodology of proselytizing within Sikhi is comparatively modest. So again, the reasoning is adjusted accordingly. I'm increasingly familiar with Christianity, increasingly familiar with Islam, so that's what I speak of. Now in terms of solutions, alternative solutions, long-term thing. How about this? Stop trying to recruit people. First of all, get your house in order. Get our house in order. I am a member of each one, whether we like it or not. So get our house in order. If the house is junky, you're not inviting people to that. I speak from personal experience right at this very moment. You're not inviting people to a junky house. And when kinfolk have 1 billion people, 2 billion people, the house is junky. So that's just basic facts. And that's basic principle, because again, it's what are you inviting people into, and how much of an improvement is it beyond what people are already experiencing? Yes, there might be some spiritual knowledge and strength in terms of offering salat, in terms of having solutions in terms of relationship, and additionally, but at the same time, you're also inviting people into corruption, stealing, murder, killing, particularly when it's attached to a republic that's doing all those things. So it's a matter of being honest about that, because you don't have to say shit to me. You don't have nothing to me to say. It's with Allah, and that's who we all are answerable to at the end of the day. So we can fool ourselves as much as we like, but that's the facts about what the situation is and what people are inviting people into, and that's it. So instead of doing that, again, well, get your house in order. Get your house in order. It's not an empire. It's not like this big recruitment thing. It's living the deen, and in living the deen, that speaks for itself, and people are drawn to that. So that's another thing too. Instead of spending money and all this time and effort making dawah in a very overt kind of way, like heal up the masjids, heal up the practice. And then with that, people come through. People be like, yo, they got something going on here. Rather than trying to go out and argue and outspeak and outblast the preacher or the rabbi or anybody else. The rabbi's not going out there anyways, but that's the consideration. That's one of the guys. Now here's the long-term thing. How about this? I said this one before. What about, you talk about Israel, Palestine. What if, I'm not getting to that one. Right. Another methodology of making dawah is investing within the ethics and the virtue of other religious practitioners. We got anxiety here. Brother's yelling about his house. Interesting. Why not just reason, brother? Let's talk. So anyways, We have motors going on. We have a brother yelling on a mobile phone in my direction. And it's like, yo, just talk. Are you talking to me? Are you talking to the others? What's going on? So, this is somewhat trippy. A lot of anger, a lot of yelling, and the motor got the black and mild going on. So, continuing on with this consideration, but the consideration is investing in the virtue and the ethics of other practitioners. So, instead of trying to win somebody over at this moment, even in this life, share, invest in the long term, build relationships with other religious communities that are practicing the essence or the earthly walk or the earthly trod of the deen. People who are practicing chastity, people who are practicing sobriety, people who are practicing honesty, people who are practicing zakat, people who are practicing fair sharing, and additionally investing within that. This brother is seriously yelling and going on. Lot of bad energy. So invest in that. Whether they're Christian, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Hindu or otherwise. You can invest in weapons. You can invest in all these other things for the sake of killing people. What about investing in education? What about investing in food without the requirement of people actually converting, with the idea that generations, they have children, they raise their children this way, they're supported in this way, and they continue cooperating in this way, still whatever their faith is, and their children do that, and their children do that. It's a treaty, it's a compact. It is a sacred trust and cooperation through the generations, rather than warfare, rather than stupid bullshit. I'm absorbing this energy and this profanity that is being directed in my direction at this moment. So that's what you're getting here, whether you're even getting this audio. So rather than investing and giving money to science and the bomb makers who are practicing bullshit, who are practicing slavery and murder and rape and pillage. That's who you're paying when you're paying for the weapons, the guns, the ammunition, the bombs, and everything else like that. Instead of putting your money and all your effort and concentration and propaganda for those purposes, how about investing in peace, identifying those Christian communities that you can mess with, that you can fuck with for the next 5 generations, for the next 7 generations. How about identifying those Jewish communities that you can fuck with for the next 7 generations? And then establishing peace and cooperation accordingly. Because when you invest your money and you invest your energy and time in the bomb makers and the guns that are not Muslim, they're not Muslim who are providing those things. That's bullshit. And that's answerable on the day of judgment. I'm a piece of shit. Don't worry about me. I'm no better or worse than anybody else who walks this earth. But I walk with God. And I strive in keeping in mindfulness that I will always have to answer to God, Allah, Hashem, Brahman, Tao. And the teachers that give me this knowledge, that share this knowledge with me, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Buddha, Sri Krishna, Lao Tzu, Jesus. These teachers tell me that I have a responsibility to share and warn other students, other children of the Most High Creator. When the children are seen tripping. So that is what I am doing here. It's not a matter of trying to convert anybody to Rastafari or to anything else. It's not a matter of condemning anybody. I am not that judge. I am an observer. And when we observe, then we also have the responsibility of sharing a message of warning and guidance and encouragement as much as possible, as loving as possible as we can. And even amongst the brethren that I'm here with at this moment, I know there's love. I said deuces and got the nod back. So even when kinfolk are heated and aches, I know it's not at me. Because who the fuck am I to be mad at? I'm a piece of shit. Why are you going to be mad at me? I'm doing nothing. And I make a very strong effort of doing nothing. So I know it ain't me. I trust in God. And with that, I know it's love. Because I know kinfolk, everybody has love. Everybody comes from love. So whatever hate kinfolk have, yelling and cursing and vitriol that kinfolk have at this moment and any moment is passing. That's the nature of hate. Ooh, it gets hot. It gets cold. Quick. And then it gets gone. There's a constancy on this earth of love and truth and peace. It requires some patience. It requires some trust. It requires some work. It requires some regularity. And it offers so much further. So, when we are welcoming people into our experience of truth and love and peace, it is beneficial that we make sure it is proper. And when it's not proper, it's for us to sit within our house and get our house in order. And then, when the visitor knocks upon the door, to invite the visitor in with generous hospitality. Let me tell it, on the door that we have right now, there's a warning of death, because that's what we're dealing with at the moment. So we got to practice that at the moment. We got to practice even just having a house. So in the moment, the house is where we at. I ain't a stone, I am a rock, but we rolling. So that's what we got to share at the moment, and we're going to get off this. So peace and blessings. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace of our supply.